إعلان مهم.
重要提示
Important announcement.
Message important.
Важное объявление.
Anuncio importante.
يرجى من المتحدثين الكرام إلقاء بياناتهم بسرعة معقولة لضمان ترجمة فورية وافية وعالية الجودة.
为了帮助口译准确完整传递发言信息，请代表发言时语速不要过快。
Speakers are kindly reminded to deliver their statements at a reasonable pace to ensure complete and quality interpretation.
Il est rappelé aux orateurs qu'ils doivent présenter leur déclaration à un rythme raisonnable afin de garantir une interprétation complète et de qualité.
Напоминаем ораторам, что для того, чтобы устный перевод был полным и качественным, необходимо выступать в умеренном темпе.
Se ruega a los oradores que pronuncien sus declaraciones a un ritmo razonable para garantizar una interpretación íntegra y de calidad.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, I hereby declare open the 20th meeting of the 62nd session of the Human Rights Council. I understand that the delegation of Venezuela has requested for the floor. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Venezuela.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, President. Thank you for the floor. I wanted to, pursuant to the recent events in our country, the impact of 2 devastating earthquakes, I wanted to require your forbearance to hold a minute of silence in homage to the 587 victims who have so far been recorded thanks to this tragedy. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you. You may be seated. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, I understand that certain delegations have requested to exercise a right of reply under agenda item 3. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Turkey. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We would like to recall once again that the only occupation in Cyprus is the usurpation of the 1960 partnership state by the Greek Cypriot side through force of arms and its transformation into a Greek Cypriot state. None of the United Nations Security Council resolutions on Cyprus have ever referred to the legitimate and rightful Turkish intervention as invasion or subsequent presence of the Turkish troops to deter further Greek Cypriot atrocities on the island as occupation. The presence of the Turkish peace forces prevents the recurrence of violence on the island. The Turkish Cypriot people are still subjected to gross human rights violations under restrictions and are denied of their rightful representation and participation in meetings, activities, and events held by international organizations, including here in this very relevant forum of the United Nations, which is mandated to promote and protect the human rights of all the peoples in the world. Between 1963 and 1974, some 30 to 40,000 Turkish Cypriots were forced to live in enclaves. In 1974, roughly 45 to 55,000 Turkish Cypriots moved to the north, driven by security fears and after decades of violence. Mr. Vice President, it is worth recalling that the Turkish Cypriot side has established the Immovable Property Commission, recognized by the European Court of Human Rights as an effective domestic remedy for addressing property issues of Greek Cypriots. Unfortunately, no parallel mechanism has been established by the Greek Cypriot side to address the long-standing property claims of Turkish Cypriots. We therefore call for an honest and constructive approach that avoids politicization and abuse of legal matters and respects the independence of judicial processes in the Turkish Cypriot side. In this respect, we're calling upon the international community to reaffirm the inherent rights of sovereign equality and equal international status of the Turkish Cypriot people so that they can take their rightful place on international platforms. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Indonesia. You have 3 minutes.
Mr. Vice President, we exercise our right of reply to the statement by Vanuatu and the concern raised in the NGO statement during the ID with SR on IDPs. Indonesia takes internal displacement which occur in some areas in Papua seriously. For years, separatist groups have imposed precisely what the SR described as a coercive condition. Their targeted attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure have induced fear and terror, forcing families to flee. In the past 2 years, 16 incidents attributed to the action of separatist group have burned at least 2 civilian houses and 10 schools, kill a teacher and 10 minors, and torture 6 teachers. The April incident referred to by Vanuatu was exactly one such attack, resulting in 15 deaths and 7 injuries. This attack also induced a wave of displacement from the population in Kimru district. The local government immediately facilitated humanitarian assistance by enhancing coordination on the ground to deliver safe and secure humanitarian response, delivering 20 tons of essential supplies, providing 50 million Indonesian rupiah investment support for each family, and is covering full medical treatment for the injured. Additionally, trauma shelters have been set up and returns will proceed when conditions are safe. Mr. Vice President, this security concern will not prevent the government of Indonesia from addressing the human rights of all people in Papua province. The formation of 6 special autonomous provinces in Papua aim to advance equitable development for all Papuans. The local government directly engaged with all relevant stakeholders to address their needs and concerns on the ground. We are concerned that misinformation and misleading information without proper context will only amplify separatist narrative and further violence on the ground. Therefore, our delegation is ready to engage further with Vanuatu to address any concern that will be better serve the Papuans. Finally, as a Papuan who was born and raised in Biak, Papua, I have seen progress and I recognize the work ahead. What Papuans need is genuine efforts that prioritize dialogue and the well-being of our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Poland. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Poland wishes to exercise the right of reply to respond to references made by Belarus concerning Poland's withdrawal from the Ottawa Convention. Over the years, Poland has consistently upheld efforts to strengthen the international legal framework in disarmament and non-proliferation. We supported negotiations of a worldwide ban of anti-personnel landmines. Following our accession to the Ottawa Convention, we ensured full compliance and destroyed all stockpiles of anti-personnel landmines. However, today's regional security environment differs fundamentally from the time of Convention's adoption. Russia's unprovoked aggression against Ukraine and its destabilizing activities pose a direct threat to Poland. Massive land invasion is no longer a term in military history, but a contemporary warfare in Ukraine. Ensuring the effective defense of our territory and the protection of our population is a fundamental responsibility of the state. Changes in our landmine policy neither diminishes nor alters Poland's long-standing commitment to humanitarian mine action, international humanitarian law, and the promotion and protection of human rights. Poland continues to support mine clearance, victim assistance, and mine risk education through both financial contributions and technical expertise. As the European Union facilitator of the United Nations General Assembly resolution on assistance in mine action, Poland actively contributes to strengthening international cooperation in addressing the humanitarian impact of anti-personnel mines, explosive remnants of war, and improvised explosive devices. This commitment is also reflected in Poland's continued support for the United Nations Mine Action Service. In 2025, Poland contributed more than $230,000 to UNMAS, including nearly $200,000 dedicated to activities in Palestine. Poland remains firmly committed to reducing the humanitarian consequences of armed conflict and will continue to be a reliable and constructive partner in international mine action. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Lithuania. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Lithuania exercises this right of reply in response to the statement made by the delegation of Belarus during the interactive dialogue on the High Commissioner's report on anti-personnel mines. Allow me to stress that Lithuania is firmly committed to international law and international rules-based order and is firmly committed to its obligations under the international humanitarian law. Lithuania's decision to withdraw from the anti-personnel mine ban treaty was based on a sober assessment of the security environment on Europe's eastern flank marked by an existential threat from Russia, which is not a state party to the convention. Let us be clear, the single greatest threat to humanitarian norms, to disarmament progress, and to the safety of civilians across Europe is Russia's unprovoked, unjustified, and illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. It's a war which, with complete disregard for international law and human life. Russia, a permanent member of the UN Security Council, has deliberately targeted civilian infrastructure and laid vast numbers of mines on Ukrainian soil. Russian mines will maim and kill civilians for decades to come. As a frontline nation, Lithuania faces direct threats from this same aggressor. The first duty of any state is to protect its citizens. Therefore, Lithuania will defend its people and territory against the threat of an authoritarian adversary which rejects the rules of war. We remain steadfastly committed to international humanitarian law, including the Geneva Conventions and their additional protocols. Lithuania will continue to take all feasible precautions to protect civilians from the effects of mines and explosive ordnance, including through fencing, marking, monitoring, and post-conflict clearance. We will maintain detailed records of any mine-affected areas and ensure the mining operations commence as soon as conditions permit. Our commitment to the mining is tangible. Lithuania co-leads, together with Iceland, the Demining Capability Coalition for Ukraine, an initiative that delivers practical, life-saving assistance to those suffering the consequences of Russia's indiscriminate warfare. The withdrawal from the Ottawa Convention will not affect our other obligations under international humanitarian law and international human rights law, which will continue to be respected. Lithuania continues to believe in the humanitarian spirit that underpinned the Ottawa Convention. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Latvia. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Latvia wishes to exercise its right of reply in response to the statement delivered by the representative of Belarus with regard to Latvia's withdrawal from the Ottawa Convention. Russia's military aggression against Ukraine, coupled with its resurgent imperialistic ambitions and disregard for the territorial integrity of sovereign nations, has profoundly impacted the security landscape of our region. Latvia has been confronted with a critical juncture where the pursuit of ideals must be balanced against the tangible reality of an imminent threat to our national security that has led to Latvia's withdrawal from the convention. We note with surprise the omission by Belarus of any reference to its neighbor Russia, which is not a state party to the Ottawa Convention and is using landmines in Ukraine, causing countless civilian casualties, amounting to grave human rights violations and running counter to the most fundamental right, the right to life. Latvia continues to support global mine action, particularly humanitarian demining. We remain committed to upholding our human rights obligations and the principles of international humanitarian law, including Geneva Conventions. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Vanuatu. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Vanuatu takes the floor in exercise of the right of reply to the intervention just delivered by Indonesia. Indonesia's response does not address the central concern raised by Pacific leaders and by numerous human rights mechanisms over many years. The continued absence of a visit by the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights to Papua and West Papua provinces. For several years, Indonesia has repeatedly expressed its willingness to facilitate such a visit, yet despite these assurances, no visit has taken place and no firm date has been publicly announced. This persistent delay undermines confidence in Indonesia's stated commitment to transparency and constructive engagement with the United Nations human rights system. As the current president of the United Human Rights Council in 2026, Indonesia bears a particular responsibility to uphold the principles of cooperation, openness, and accountability that underpin this institution. In this regard, Pacific leaders have called upon Indonesia and the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights to agree upon the publicly announce a date for the High Commissioner's visit before the conclusion of the Council's 63rd session in September 2026. This is not an unreasonable request. An independent visit by the High Commissioner would provide an opportunity to assess the human rights situation firsthand, engage with all relevant stakeholders, and contribute to greater transparency and trust. Indonesia is confident in its assertions regarding conditions on the ground. It shouldn't have any hesitation in facilitating such access without further delay. We therefore reiterate our call for Indonesia to move beyond expressions of willingness and to demonstrate tangible cooperation by confirming a timetable for the long-awaited visit. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cyprus. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Vice President. Cyprus is exercising the right of reply in response to the statement by the delegation of Turkey and its allegations of human rights violations against Turkish Cypriots. In this context, it remains essential not to lose sight of the situation in Cyprus, in particular the ongoing violations of international humanitarian law and international human rights law that are a direct result of Turkey's continued military occupation of 1/3 of the territory of a sovereign UN member state, the Republic of Cyprus. In this regard, the international community must ensure that all Cypriots are afforded the same level of protection as in other situations of foreign military aggression or occupation. The credibility of international law in the UN system would be seriously undermined if aggressor states such as Turkey, acting in violation of the UN Charter, were permitted to invoke the passage of time to deflect accountability and diminish the imperative to address these violations. We categorically reject the unfounded allegations advanced by Turkey, as well as its persistent promotion of a secessionist entity condemned by the UN Security Council. These actions constitute an attempt to divert attention from Turkey's responsibility for the ongoing human rights violations in Cyprus. Turkey's claim to a unilateral right to invade and occupy Cyprus is untenable. It runs counter to both reason and the fundamental principles of the UN Charter and is unequivocally rejected. The 1974 Turkish invasion of Cyprus was an act of aggression and a clear violation of international law. The invasion and subsequent occupation and the secessionist actions have been repeatedly condemned by the United Nations, including through General Assembly Resolution 37253 and Security Councils 541 and 550. The unlawful military occupation of the northern part of Cyprus has affected all Cypriots. Beyond the displacement of nearly 1/3 of Greek Cypriot population, the ongoing repression of the enclave population aimed at their gradual disappearance from the occupied areas continues alongside a systemic policy of demographic and cultural alteration. This includes the transfer of settlers and the destruction of cultural and religious heritage. Turkey's policy also adversely affects Turkish Cypriots by undermining their identity, restricting their freedoms, and depriving them of the full enjoyment of their rights as Cypriot and European citizens. Turkey keeps them isolated and effectively holds them hostage to its pursuit of recognition by the illegal secessionist entity established in the occupied territory in violation of fundamental principles of international law and with the aim of undermining the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Republic of Cyprus. Turkey's aggression further extends the continued transfer of military equipment and the establishment of military infrastructure in the occupied areas under the direction and control of the Turkish military headquarters in Turkey. Turkey must withdraw its occupying troops from Cyprus, abandon its two-state secessionist policy, and enable the reunification of the island and its people. It must also comply fully with its obligation under international law and bring an end to the ongoing violations of the rights of all Cypriots. I thank you.
Thank you. I understand that the distinguished representative of Turkey has requested a second right of reply. You have 2 minutes.
Mr. Vice President, we would like to exercise our second right of reply. It is indeed true that there is still an occupation in Cyprus, which is the occupation of the government of the now defunct Republic of Cyprus by the Greek Cypriots. The 1960 Partnership Republic of Cyprus, which was established between the two political equals, namely Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots, has only lasted for 3 years. In 1963, the Greek Cypriot side resorted to violence, and the Turkish Cypriots were expelled from all organs of the government and even from their homes by force of arms. As a result of this ethnic cleansing campaign directed at Turkish Cypriot people with the ultimate aim of eliminating all the Turkish Cypriots, UN peacekeeping force was deployed in the island in 1964. When they made a final attempt in 1974 through a coup d'etat with the ultimate aim of enosis by eliminating all the Turkish Cypriot people, Turkey, as a guarantor power, intervened on the island to save the lives of the Turkish Cypriot people. Therefore, it is quite absurd to describe the subsequent presence of the Turkish troops on the island as occupation. Lastly, I would like to recall that none of the UN Security Council resolutions on Cyprus have ever referred to the legitimate intervention of Turkey and the presence of Turkish troops to deter further Greek Cypriot atrocities on the island as occupation. I thank you.
Thank you. So this was the last speaker on my list. Is there any other delegation requesting to exercise the right of reply in relation to the statements made during this item? I see none. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, with this, we have concluded the consideration of agenda item 3. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, I hereby declare open agenda item 4 entitled Human Rights Situations That Require the Council's Attention. We will now begin the interactive dialogue on the High Commissioner's report on the situation of human rights in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. The list of speakers will close in 15 minutes. I have now the honor to give the floor to Mr. Volker Turk, High Commissioner for Human Rights, to present the report. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, distinguished delegates. Permítanme comenzar expresando.
Allow me to begin by expressing my most sincere condolences to those people who have lost family members and loved ones in the earthquakes which hit on Wednesday. My thoughts are with those individuals who were injured and with their family members who are today confronting uncertainty, pain, and a difficult road before them. Our solidarity goes to the whole of Venezuela's people at this difficult time.
The past year has seen some important changes to the human rights situation in Venezuela. Since 1 May 2025, my office has confirmed the release of more than 1,200 people, although many still have conditions attached to their freedom. Most of them were detained in the post-election period of July 2024. My report notes some 40 cases of arbitrary detention during 2025, including opposition politicians, human rights defenders, journalists, union members, and humanitarians. Access to justice and accountability remained constrained. The conviction of 8 police officers on charges related to killings during security operations is an important step. However, no progress was reported on investigating deaths during protests in 2014, 2017, 2019, and 2024. Nor have the authorities opened investigations into alleged human rights violations by the armed forces during Operation Sarasa in 2024, including the killing of 30 people. My office continues to receive reports of denial of due process, including through lack of access to lawyers and files. The economic situation continued to worsen during the reporting period, and cuts to humanitarian funding took a serious toll. The cost of the family food basket increased by more than 700% in bolivars between March 2025 and 2026. More than 5 million Venezuelans need urgent food assistance. Salaries remain low, while inflation is high and volatile. The new standard urban transport fare of 140 bolivars exceeds the monthly salary of public sector workers. Most Venezuelans have very limited access to healthcare. While the United States of America has recently granted import licenses in certain economic sectors, sanctions continue to restrict the availability of medical supplies. Mr. Vice President, this year has seen a number of positive steps. According to government figures, more than 8,000 people have benefited from the amnesty law adopted in February 2026, including 314 who were released from detention. However, implementation of the law needs to be fully compliant with international human rights law. This year has also seen a marked increase in public protests. Although no major incidents were reported, the presence of the security forces and the intimidation of protesters, unionists, journalists, and human rights defenders continue to create a climate of fear. Sustained progress requires consistency and transparency. It also requires strengthened, independent oversight of detention centers. Hundreds of people remain arbitrarily detained, with persistent reports of deaths in custody, ill treatment, unwarranted use of force, lack of medical care, and poor conditions. The announcement of the death of Victor Hugo Guerra Navas, who was forcibly disappeared in January 2025, and his late mother's long search for him, prompted a public outcry. The official investigation provided no information on Mr. Guerra's enforced disappearances. Despite the recognition by senior officials of the need to overhaul the anti-hate law, no progress has been made toward repealing or amending legislation that restricts civic space. Mr. Vice President, official announcements about reforms to the Venezuelan justice system are welcome. These reforms, if implemented, are a crucial opportunity to bring institutions and practices into line with international standards. These efforts should include reform of the security sector with effective vetting and oversight of the security forces, the meaningful participation of civil society, and concrete steps to ensure accountability for serious human rights violations. The nationwide consultation process on these reforms can be a significant step if it is inclusive and participatory. The selection of judges needs to ensure their independence and be merit-based and transparent. Disciplinary measures need to be in line with international standards. The closure of the Helicoide prison sends an important message. However, the transfer of its inmates to facilities with even poorer conditions, in some cases without notifying their relatives or legal representatives, is a serious concern. Mr. Vice President, my office in Venezuela is engaging with the national authorities and gradually resuming its activities with the aim of discharging its full mandate. This provides a valuable platform for advancing the protection of human rights, technical cooperation, capacity building, and dialogue between and among stakeholders as part of broader efforts to build trust and confidence. Our interactions with local partners, including civil society, are essential to understanding the evolving situation and needs, identifying gaps, and tailoring our support. They help to foster constructive channels between communities and authorities. I have shared a set of confidence-building measures centered on human rights with the Venezuelan authorities. Broader progress will require structural changes to address grievances and meet people's basic needs. It will be essential to establish the truth, find appropriate remedies for those who have suffered, guarantee that there is no repetition of serious human rights violations, and create conditions for reconciliation. This will require steps to rebuild trust in state institutions through meaningful consultation with civil society, victims, and their families. Expanding civic space is crucial. Regular and unhindered access to all places of detention by independent and impartial entities is a priority. My office stands ready to provide technical support on improving conditions. Human rights and transparency must be at the heart of Venezuela's economic recovery. People need to be at the center of financial decisions, and revenues, including those from the oil, gas, and critical mineral sectors, must benefit all Venezuelans. The authorities need to consult and cooperate in good faith with indigenous peoples through their own representative institutions to obtain their prior, free, and informed consent for all operations and activities that impact them. I would also like to reiterate the disproportionate impact of broad sectoral sanctions on the human rights of Venezuelans and call again for them to be reassessed and lifted. I call on the Venezuelan authorities to cooperate with international human rights and accountability mechanisms, including the fact-finding mission established by the Human Rights Council and the International Criminal Court. Mr. Vice President, finally, I commend the swift response by many countries to the devastating earthquake, and I encourage the international community to provide sustained and scaled-up support if needed, prioritizing the rights and dignity of those most affected. Thank you.
Thank you, High Commissioner. According to our practice, we shall start by hearing the delegation of the country concerned. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Alexander Yanes, Vice Minister for Multilateral Affairs of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. You have 5 minutes.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, President. We come to this council with the idea of conveying some important measures in terms of national dialogue and in favor of human rights that have been taken since last year and which have been built on in recent months. Similarly, it was our interest to present to this council some of the actions, some of the decisions taken to strengthen cooperation between our government and OHCHR, as well as with other council special procedures. We also wanted to provide updates on progress made in our country regarding presentation of the report on human rights following our UPR, which, as you know, which will take place in October and whose oral presentation is penciled in for January 2027. We've also spent much time, as we have for much time, Venezuela supports voluntary mandates on human rights, not mandates, though, imposed against countries. Nonetheless, the recent earthquakes in our country with 7.2 and 7.5 on the Richter scale mean that we have to inform you regarding the tragic circumstances that our country faces as a result of these unprecedented events. First, let me express our profoundest gratitude to all the feelings of solidarity that we've received from all 5 continents and the offers of bilateral and multilateral cooperation and assistance to address this grave emergency situation. I must welcome the message of solidarity from the High Commissioner to the Venezuelan people and government. All forms of solidarity, material, but above all moral, at this point are essential in these critical times. In the last report from the acting president Delcy Rodriguez, just after the simultaneous earthquakes, she reported that the death toll was over 500 persons. Injured were 4,300 people. Disappeared persons thus far are at over 700 people. There's still an undetermined number of people that who are trapped under the rubble. 3,000 families lost all their property and situation and have no roof over their heads. And also, when it comes to material damage, the figure is incalculable. One of the most hardest hit regions reported the worst damage throughout its territory, covering 1,500 kilometers squared. Figures say that over 8 hospitals were left in very bad situations, as were trade centers. The Maiquetía airport, 30 minutes from Caracas, our capital city, which serves for air connections, has been closed due to damage, and we hope to make it operational again as soon as possible. The extent, the devastating effect of the two simultaneous earthquakes and more than 214 aftershocks have modified the state of, we have to modify the state of emergency in line with our constitution. Now, in any disaster, the first 72 hours are the most critical for saving lives. Today at midnight in Geneva, we'll be reaching the first 48 hours within those 72 since the earthquake hit. For that reason, there's been an intensification of search, rescue, and salvage operations using national capacities together with now international support that's come to help our country. Today, we raise our voice, and we hope that as many people as possible can be saved. Before concluding, I want to thank you for allowing me to dedicate a minute of silence as a just tribute to all the victims of this disaster. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The list of speakers is now closed. I now invite delegations to ask questions to the High Commissioner and make comments on the report. The speaking time is 1 minute, 30 seconds for all. I would like to recall that the duration of interactive dialogues is 1 hour and 30 minutes. However, if time permits, additional delegations will be able to speak. So I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the European Union.
Mr. Vice President, we express our solidarity with the people of Venezuela, and we are deploying emergency assistance to Venezuela after the terrible earthquakes. The EU thanks the High Commissioner, whose report shows the importance of OHCHR monitoring and reporting on Venezuela. As the country enters a new phase, we call on the authorities to engage constructively with all international human rights mechanisms, including the FFM. The EU welcomes steps towards the restoration of the full capacity of the office, which needs to include the office's unfettered access to all regions and detention centers. The EU welcomes the release of detainees, including dual and foreign citizens. EU dual nationals in detention need unhindered consular access. All remaining political prisoners must be freed immediately, fully, and unconditionally. We encourage meaningful reforms, including of the security apparatus and the criminal justice system, implemented in full compliance with international human rights law. The EU remains concerned by reports of repression against dissent. We urge the authorities to respect, protect, and fulfill human rights and foster an open and inclusive civic and democratic space. Finally, we reiterate our support for a Venezuelan-led dialogue towards the restoration of democracy and the rule of law and human rights. Our full statement can be found on the extranet. High Commissioner, what are your expectations on access to detention centers and monitoring of the releases? Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Belgium on behalf of a group of countries.
Mr. Vice President, I deliver this statement on behalf of the Benelux countries. We align ourselves with the EU statement. First of all, let me express our sympathy to the people of Venezuela affected by the recent earthquakes. We thank the High Commissioner for his report, and we welcome steps taken by the Venezuelan authorities to allow the OHCHR office to return to the country and call upon them for the full restoration of the mandate of the office, including complete access to detention centers. In addition, we encourage Venezuela to cooperate with the FFM and grant them access. The Benelux countries acknowledge the continued release of political prisoners, although we observe that the pace has slowed down and many of those released remain subject to restrictive and conditional measures. Almost 400 people remain arbitrarily detained. We are deeply concerned about the cases of Vanessa Sanchez, Enrique Parada, Orlando Laufer, Emir Lendris Benitez, Alianis Araujo, and many others. We call for their immediate and unconditional release. Additionally, we urge the authorities to strengthen efforts to restore civic space, safeguard press freedom, and guarantee inclusive political processes by ensuring the full participation of all political actors. High Commissioner, in your assessment, which key indicators best reflect current developments in Venezuela's political transition? I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Estonia on behalf of a group of countries.
Thank you, Vice President. I have the honor to deliver the statement on behalf of the Nordic Baltic states. We express our condolences and full solidarity with regard to the devastating earthquakes in Venezuela. High Commissioner, we thank for this update. The findings presented continue to paint a concerning picture of the human rights situation in Venezuela. Despite some recent developments, we note with the concern that the underlying structures enabling systemic human rights violations remain largely intact. These persistent shortcomings continue to undermine public trust in institutions and hinder prospects for democratic recovery and national reconciliation. Meaningful progress will require comprehensive, verifiable, and irreversible reforms, including the restoration of judicial independence and due process guarantees. Such reforms are essential to ensure the effective protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms and to strengthen the rule of law. Independent judicial and prosecutorial institutions will also be critical to addressing organized crime and other challenges. We remain concerned by the absence of credible accountability measures for past and ongoing violations. It is vital that the Venezuelan authorities take meaningful steps to end impunity and, as a state party to the International Criminal Court, fully cooperate with the Office of the Prosecutor. High Commissioner, could you elaborate on the current cooperation between your office and the Venezuelan authorities? I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Guatemala on behalf of a group of countries.
Muchas gracias, señor vicepresidente.
Thank you, President. First, we want to extend our greatest solidarity and support to the people of Venezuela, the families, and the first response teams in the wake of the earthquakes on Wednesday.
Vice President, on behalf of Argentina, Canada, Chile, Ecuador, Paraguay, Uruguay, and my own country, Guatemala, we thank the High Commissioner for his report. We welcome recent steps taken by Venezuela, notably the release of some political detainees. This development is encouraging in response to long-standing calls from international community. While encouraged by the adoption of an amnesty law, the measures fall short, particularly in its scope and its failure to fully ensure accountability for human rights violations. We continue to call for the immediate and unconditional release of all remaining arbitrarily detained people without delay or conditions, and then repeal of laws and measures still limiting political participation and freedom of opinion and expression. We also call for the respect of economic, social, and cultural rights. Finally, the core group encouraged consensus building in favor of the new election to ensure a Venezuelan-led process towards the restoration of democracy, political pluralism, the rule of law, and respect for human rights. Credible, inclusive, and transparent election will constitute a key milestone in this transition. We stand ready to support this effort and underscore the importance of sustaining and building on the current momentum.
Thank you. Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba on behalf of a group of countries.
Señor Vice President, it's my honor to read out the following statement issued today in Geneva by the group of countries Friends in Defense of the UN Charter. Members of the group express their profound condolences and their full support and solidarity to the government and people of the sister Republic of Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela following the tragic loss of human life, disappeared persons, missing persons, thousands of people wounded, and massive material damage caused by the devastating earthquakes that took place on the 24th of June, affecting various regions of the country. The scale of the disaster requires an urgent, unconditional response, one of great solidarity from the international community. The members of the group reaffirm our commitment to the values of solidarity and international cooperation and support all Venezuelan men and women in these difficult times, wishing them a speedy recovery from this tragedy. Thank you very much, Vice President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Chile.
Señor Vicepresidente. Vice President, I'd like to begin by conveying on behalf of the government of Chile the solidarity of people and government of Venezuela following the earthquakes. My government has sent urgent rescue capacities to the country. We convey our condolences to the families and to the victims. Chile is grateful to OHCR for presentation of the report on the human rights situation in Venezuela. We value the gradual, although limited, renewal of cooperation between Venezuela and international human rights protection mechanisms. Without prejudice to this, we continue to be concerned by reports of arbitrary detention conditions, restrictions on civic space and on fundamental freedoms, as well as the lack of transparency when it comes to political prisoners released and the lack of consular attention given to foreigners released. However, we are troubled by continued obstacles to full justice and accountability. Without doubt, guarantees of non-repetition, justice, accountability are crucial when moving towards a society of social cohesion and transparency. Finally, Chile believes that the current report is an important input in supporting efforts from the Venezuelan institutions to make them into concrete progress geared towards strengthening the promotion and protection of human rights. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Portugal.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Portugal
would like to express its full solidarity and its deepest condolences to the people of Venezuela. Civil protection units have been sent to Caracas.
High Commissioner for his comprehensive report. At a time when Venezuela is undertaking important political and institutional reforms, it is essential to ensure that any steps towards national reconciliation are accompanied by tangible progress in the protection of human rights, the strengthening of democratic institutions, and the expansion of civic space. We encourage the Venezuelan authorities to engage constructively with the Office of the High Commissioner, the fact-finding mission, and other human rights mechanisms, including by ensuring unrestricted access to the country and to all places of detention. We take good note of the bill on amnesty and the new peace and democratic coexistence plan. We welcome the release of arbitrarily detained persons, including foreign nationals and dual citizens, as a positive step towards rebuilding trust, and encourage further measures to strengthen democratic institutions and uphold human rights. While these initiatives may contribute to confidence building, it is essential that their implementation fully complies with international human rights standards. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Albania.
Monsieur le Vice-Président. Thank you, Vice President. Albania expresses its profound solidarity with the people of Venezuela in the wake of the earthquake. Our thoughts are with the victims, the wounded and their families in these difficult times. Albania thanks the High Commissioner for his report, reiterates its full support to the work of OHCHR and the International Fact-Finding Mission. Albania calls on the Venezuelan authorities to guarantee them full, safe, unhindered access to the country. We take note of political developments taking place this year. However, despite certain signs of openness, information available highlights a persistence in restrictions on civic space, absence of substantial institutional reforms, and concerns linked to the fate of people still detained on political grounds. We encourage the authorities to engage judicial, electoral, and legislative credible reforms to protect human rights defenders, journalists, and civil society, and to fully restore fundamental freedoms, rule of law, and democracy. Finally, we encourage them to step up the struggle against impunity and stress the importance of ensuring that those responsible for international crimes should be held accountable for their acts. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Paraguay.
Gracias, vicepresidente.
Thank you, Vice President. Paraguay expresses its solidarity with the Venezuelan people. We also, which has been reflected at the highest level following the earthquake. We welcome the presentation of the report, and we welcome progress made in adoption of the amnesty law and the recent release of political prisoners. We continue to be troubled by the persistence of practices in violation of human rights, such as arbitrary detention, enforced disappearance, cases of torture, intimidation of human rights defenders, as well as protracted periods of incommunicado detention of detainees. And we lament the death of Victor Hugo Quero Navas in detention. We believe his case should be subject to a swift, exhaustive, independent, impartial investigation. We urge once more for the immediate, unconditional release of all arbitrarily detained persons, and we reiterate the importance of moving towards accountability and towards institutional reforms that would guarantee full respect for human rights and the rule of law. We reiterate our call to the Venezuelan authorities to cease all practices in violation of human rights, to uphold their international commitments, and guarantee the full respect for the democratic order and sovereign expression of the willingness of the Venezuelan people. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Argentina.
Presidente.
Thank you, Vice President. The darkest nights of our peoples test the intensity of our fears, but also the strength of our convictions and the quality of our solidarity. We'd like to convey our condolences, profound condolences to the families of the victims of the earthquake, and state that Argentina is cooperating, providing assistance as appropriate to respond to these tragic circumstances, because we're not indifferent to the suffering of our dear Venezuelan people. As to the report presented by OHCHR, we welcome their work, and we welcome the gradual renewal of cooperation with the office and the release of a significant number of detainees. For the report states that important challenges remain when it comes to rule of law and protection of human rights. These require priority attention. We urge Venezuela to fully implement its recommendations, guaranteeing independent investigations, respect for judicial guarantees, and exercise of fundamental freedoms. We'd like to reiterate our concern at the arbitrary detention of our countryman Germán Giuliani, and we urge for his immediate release, as well as the release of other detainees who, moreover, are suffering the profound anguish of uncertainty and despair. Argentina will continue to support the promotion of dialogue, respect for human rights, and the existence of full-fledged democracy. So we know that tragedies test the resistance of walls, but we also know that nations test themselves through their firmness and value in moving towards reconstruction. We have every confidence that this will be the case with the Venezuelan people. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Brazil.
Gracias, Senor Vice. Thank you, Vice President. Brazil is grateful to the High Commissioner for Human Rights for presenting his report. The Brazilian government expresses profound condolences following the deaths caused by the earthquakes in the territory of Venezuela that hit on the 24th of June, especially for the fate of the victims who died in the earthquake. We state our full willingness to offer solidarity and support to the government and people of Venezuela through humanitarian assistance. Brazil continues to follow the situation of human rights closely in Venezuela. We are aware of progress made at a political level, as well as the return of opposition and continued release of political prisoners. Nonetheless, we think it's necessary to accelerate these releases and assess the records of judicial proceedings. We state our concern at the deaths of persons in the custody of the Venezuelan state, and we urge the government to carry out impartial investigations, in-depth, independent into those cases. Brazil thinks it's crucial to enhance dialogue between the government and the opposition with a view to accelerating the process of national reconciliation. Finally, Brazil condemns unilateral coercive measures against Venezuela. They violate international law and they directly impact the human rights of the population. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Burundi. I see they are absent. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Romania.
Mr. Vice President, Romania thanks the High Commissioner for the report. We align with the EU statement. In these days of loss and destruction after the devastating earthquake, we express our condolences and solidarity with Venezuelan people. We've noted the authorities' recent stances on Venezuela's current path and look forward to positive developments. Sadly, acts of intimidation, harassment, repression, and arbitrary detentions against civilian population, dissenting voices, civil society, human rights defenders, and media workers continue to be reported. We deplore them, call for their cessation, and for guarantees for full respect of civic, political, economic, social, and cultural rights of every citizen of Venezuela. All remaining political detainees must be unconditionally released. We renew our call on Venezuela to cooperate with all human rights mechanisms and to allow the full restoration of OHCHR's presence in the country. Monitoring a reporting system is vital for continuing the investigation and documentation of violations and abuses committed in the country and for putting an end to impunity. The path towards reconciliation, democracy, and the rule of law passes through truth and justice. We reaffirm our staunch support for a peaceful and genuine, rights-based democratic transition to democracy in full respect for the will of Venezuelan people. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Colombia.
Gracias, señor vice.
Thank you very much, Vice President. We'd like to express our solidarity to the Venezuelan people following the recent earthquake and reiterate our commitment to international cooperation to address the most urgent humanitarian tragedies. We renew our commitment to cooperation between the country and the OHCHR office in the return of the staff to the country. We support technical support on children's rights in the events which took place on the 3rd and 4th of June 2026, which allowed to progress with recommendations on family reunion and safe return. This has supported the rights of boys and girls. We also welcome the freeing of those deprived of their freedom in the context of the amnesty law, and we're grateful for the progress made with the National Roundtable to address the situation confronting Colombians detained in Venezuela. We urge the country to continue its cooperation and strengthen that with the UN's human rights system in order to broaden human rights, as well as the civic space, and strengthen mechanisms of dialogue. Finally, we join the High Commissioner in calling for member states to review and repeal any sanctions exacerbating existing problems in Venezuela and undermining the enjoyment of human rights. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of South Sudan.
Mr. Vice President, South Sudan, first of all, let me express our sincere condolences to the people of Venezuela on the devastating earthquakes that struck the country yesterday. South Sudan thanks the High Commissioner for his report. We commend Venezuela for its continued engagement and constructive dialogue with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and for the national efforts undertaken to strengthen national institutions, address social and economic challenges, and for the release of detainees and adoption of amnesty law. South Sudan is deeply concerned by any form of external interference in the internal affairs of Venezuela that undermines its sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity. The Venezuelan people alone have the ability and the right to determine their political, economic, and social future through peaceful and democratic means, free from foreign pressure, coercion, or intervention. We call upon the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and relevant stakeholders to provide support aimed at strengthening national capacities and advancing the well-being and human rights of the Venezuelan people. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Spain.
Muchas gracias, señor vicepresidente.
Thank you very much, Vice President. Spain would like to begin its statement by reiterating our solidarity to our sister people of Venezuela in the face of the devastating earthquakes that have just struck. Spain's support is already on the ground, and our emergency response landed this morning in Caracas, and our development agency is also placing trained staff at the disposal of those in need. Spain aligns itself with the EU statement and confirms its support for the fundamental work of the High Commissioner. My statement would basically then echo the elements that have just been heard in the room. First of all, we take note of some positive developments, including freeing some political prisoners under the amnesty law. For those steps to become real progress towards reconciliation and democratic institutionalization, the implementation should be full, transparent, and unconditional. Secondly, we're very concerned by the restriction on the civic space and any harassment for political ends, as well as the persistent repressive apparatus. Thirdly, it's imperative that we allow the Office of the High Commissioner to operate freely in Venezuela. Fourthly, impunity isn't possible. All human rights must be properly clarified. And fifthly, it's fundamental that we guarantee consular access to Spanish Venezuelan binational citizens to defend their human rights. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Eritrea.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The government of Eritrea extends its heartfelt sympathies to the people, our colleagues here in Geneva, and the government of Venezuela following the devastating earthquake that has struck the country. We share in your grief and keep you in our thoughts during this challenging time. Eritrea reiterates its principled and longstanding position against country-specific mandates and resolutions. Our own experience has shown that these mechanisms fall short of a balanced and credible approach and do not sufficiently encourage genuine dialogue. Instead, they continue to be weaponized as tools for political pressure and selective targeting against sovereign developing nations. We remain deeply concerned by the continued imposition of illegal unilateral coercive measures against Venezuela. These comprehensive economic sanctions constitute a flagrant violation of international law and the UN Charter. They deliberately undermine the Venezuelan people's right to development, severely restrict their access to basic services, and serve as the primary driver of the humanitarian challenges facing the country. Progress in human rights cannot be achieved while a nation is subjected to external economic strangulation. We urge the initiators calling for these mandates to abandon confrontational, politically motivated approaches. The Council needs to return to its founding principles of constructive dialogue, mutual respect, and earnest cooperation. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of China.
Mr. Vice President, in the wake of the recent devastating earthquakes, China wishes to convey its deepest sympathy to the government and people of Venezuela, will provide humanitarian aid, and we're confident that under the leadership of the government, the country will recover itself. Mr. Vice President, China's position on the question of Venezuela has been consistent and clear fast. We are steadfast in upholding UN Charter and the basic norms of international law, oppose illegal military actions, unilateral sanctions, and interference in internal affairs. We commend the Venezuelan government for its efforts and progress in the field of human rights, including its constructive cooperation with all the stakeholders. We'd like to repeat that the unilateral sanctions imposed on Venezuela by a few countries have seriously impeded the economic and social development of the country and the efforts to improve people's lives. With dire consequences on the human rights of the people, they should therefore be lifted. We will continue to steadfastly support Venezuela in safeguarding its sovereignty, security, and legitimate rights, and will firmly support all countries choosing their own human rights path compatible with their national circumstances to better promote and protect the human rights of their peoples. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation.
Vice President, we want to express our profound condolences to the victims and families following the recent earthquake in Venezuela. Russia is closely following the situation in Venezuela. We condemned the military intervention by the US of the 3rd of January this year, during which the lawful president of Venezuela and his wife were arrested. In so doing, US violated all fundamental legal norms. This point of view is shared by the vast majority of states in the global majority. We categorically condemn the ongoing sanctions pressure against the Bolivarian Republic, which is rendering a most adverse impact on the human rights situation in the country and exercise of their right to development. Despite the partial adaptation of the Venezuelan economy to UCMs, maintenance of ongoing restrictions is undermining the country's economic capacities. The irresponsible steps by Washington are yet another example of neo-colonialism and imperialism, which repeatedly has been rejected by people both in Latin America and in the global south as a whole. Such actions should receive an objective multilateral response using the UN universal mechanisms and other multilateral fora. We firmly believe that any problems and contradictions between the US and Venezuela should be resolved through dialogue as provided for in the UN Charter, whose values have been applied subjectively by a number of countries, dependent on the ongoing political situation at a given time. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. At the outset, Sri Lanka wishes to express solidarity with Venezuelan people and extend deep condolences to the families of the victim of the tragic earthquake. Sri Lanka commends the government of Venezuela for its continuous and constructive engagement with this council. We particularly note its regular submission of treaty body reports, its cooperation in facilitating visits by special procedure mandate holders, and its active participation across 3 cycles of the Universal Periodic Review. We note with concern that Resolution 57/36 was adopted without the consent of the country concerned. Sri Lanka maintains its principled position that country-specific initiatives of this nature are inherently counterproductive and fail to meaningfully advance the promotion and protection of human rights on the ground. Consequently, we urge the Council to steadfastly adhere to its founding principles of universality, impartiality, objectivity, and non-selectivity. We emphasize that international dialogue and cooperation must always respect the national sovereignty and territorial integrity of member states in line with the UN Charter. In conclusion, Sri Lanka encourages the Council to pursue a path of genuine cooperation with the Venezuelan authorities that truly serves to support and protect the human rights of Venezuelan people. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. My delegation expresses its deepest condolences and full solidarity with the government and people of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela following the devastating earthquake. We are deeply concerned at the ongoing politically motivated and biased practices directed at sovereign states under the pretext of promoting human rights. Resolution 57/36 entitled Situation of Human Rights in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela is the result of the imposition of a mandate that demonstrates the politicization and selectivity of the Council. It is in violation of universal principles of respect for territorial integrity, sovereignty, and non-interference in the internal affairs of states, as enshrined in the UN Charter. We commend the government of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela for its strenuous efforts and the progress made in the field of human rights, and firmly reject the imposition of the UCMs that adversely affect the human rights of the Venezuelan people. The OHCHR must strictly adhere to the principles of objectivity, impartiality, and non-selectivity. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Yemen.
Vice President, Yemen wishes to thank the OHCHR for the report on the situation of human rights in Venezuela. We commend the report's references to the positive developments and resuming cooperation with the OHCHR. At the same time, we take note of the ongoing political, economic, and social challenges facing the government of Venezuela, challenges that affect people's ability to enjoy their basic rights. In closing, we underscore our support for all constructive efforts which aim to achieve stability and prosperity in Venezuela and for the benefit of its friendly people. And thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Poland.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We extend our deepest condolences to the people of Venezuela on the recent tragic consequences of the two earthquakes. Mr. Vice President, Poland aligns itself with the statement of the European Union and remains deeply committed to supporting all human rights mechanisms aimed at protecting human rights and fundamental freedoms in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Despite some progress and further commitments made by the Venezuelan authorities, the human rights situation in the country remains concerning. We remain troubled by the continued reports of human rights violations and by the legal framework that enables arbitrary detention, enforced disappearance, restrictions on the freedom of expression, peaceful assembly and association, as well as acts of intimidation against political opponents. While noting the recent releases of detainees, including foreign and dual nationals, we urge the authorities in Caracas to accelerate the process of the unconditional release and rehabilitation of all individuals unlawfully deprived of their liberty. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Belarus.
Thank you, Vice President. First of all, we want to express our sincere condolences to the friendly Republic of Venezuela following the earthquakes. And in spirit of reliable friendship, we confirm our willingness to provide support to the country in these difficult times. With respect to the latest report and the discussion on the human rights situation in Venezuela, we confirm Belarus's position against the practice in the HRC of adopting duplicating resolutions which call for repeated reports regarding country situations. These are adopted without the consent of the country concerned, and these actions demonstrate lack of respect for state sovereignty and the principle of non-interference in international affairs. The UCMs applied against Venezuela and sectoral sections over a long time have gravely affected the country's economy and the exercise of a whole series of rights of the human rights of the Venezuelan people, including the right to food, medication, and other fundamental rights. Against that backdrop, spending significant resources on keeping afloat various mechanisms and the preparation of reports does not help establish dialogue or cooperation on human rights. Venezuela has renewed cooperation with OHCHR, is interacting in the context of the UPR, and is abiding by its treaty commitments. We think it's necessary to support the efforts of the government and the reforms that are being carried out. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Mr. President, before turning to the substance of our statement, we wish to express our deepest sympathy and unwavering solidarity with the government and the people of the Republic of Venezuela following the devastating earthquake. At this moment of profound human suffering, it is imperative that the international community stand united in ensuring the rapid delivery of humanitarian assistance and refrain from any action that could further aggravate the hardships faced by the affected population. In this regard, the recent tragedy once again underscores the grave humanitarian consequences of unilateral coercive measures. Such measures undermine the capacity of affected states to effectively prepare for, respond to, and recover from natural disasters by restricting access to financial resources, essential goods, technology, and critical infrastructure. We therefore reiterate the need to ensure that humanitarian assistance is delivered promptly, impartially, and without impediment, and that no unilateral coercive measure prevent affected populations from enjoying their fundamental human rights. Particularly in the aftermath of natural disasters, and other humanitarian emergencies. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Germany.
Vice President, Germany aligns itself with the EU statement. At the outset, we wish to extend our sincere and heartfelt condolences to the victims of yesterday's earthquake and express our solidarity with all those affected. We thank the High Commissioner for his report and its clear recommendations on necessary next step as Venezuela stands at a crossroads. Human rights needs to be at the base of any change in the country. We call on the Venezuelan authorities to open up civic space for free and equal participation of all political actors, as well as meaningful dialogue within the country. We remain concerned by reports of arbitrary detentions, often in dire prison conditions, and lack of access to justice. We urge the Venezuelan authorities to fully release all political detainees and restore their rights, including reparations, and to commence thorough institutional reforms. We further call on the Venezuelan authorities to fully cooperate with the Office of the High Commissioner and with the fact-finding mission established by this Council. Only through accountability can there be a path to the future. We appreciate that OHCHR has been able to resume activities in the country and stress that the office needs to be able to fully carry out its mandate across the country without interference. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Switzerland.
Merci, Monsieur le Vice.
Thank you very much, Vice President. Our thoughts go to all of those affected by the double earthquake. We thank the High Commissioner for this report and we greet the progress made since the beginning of the year, such as the liberation of more than 1,000 people arbitrarily detained. We encourage authorities to guarantee all rights to those who are subject to criminal prosecution. The nomination of Madame González Lobato as public prosecutor is also a public signal. We also greet the resumption of cooperation with the High Commissioner's Office and encourage the authorities to grant them all necessary access to detention centres, particularly cooperations with international mechanisms is essential to consolidate dialogue and progress. Switzerland greets the implementation of the peace programme and democratic cohabitation. The will to reform the judicial system is also very positive. These initiatives are essential and we encourage the authorities to continue on this road. We're ready to support this process. We call for a repeal of repressive legislation which underpins repressive practices that remain in force. The revitalization of the civic space and guarantees of fundamental freedoms represent essential elements for a sustainable improvement of the situation. High Commissioner, the situation in Venezuela remains fragile. What opportunity do you see to ensure the protection of all stakeholders, including critical voices? Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Burkina Faso.
Before I begin, allow me to convey my condolences to the people of the Bolivarian Republic. So my delegation takes note of the findings in the report concerning progress made, and we greet the substantial progress made by Venezuela since the previous report. My delegation would like to recall that it is a key responsibility of each state to promote and protect human rights in that country. We therefore greet the resumption of cooperation between Venezuela and the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and the adoption by the National Assembly of the amnesty law and democratic reinstallment, as well as liberations from detention centres and visits to monitor these. Nonetheless, we see remaining challenges. Nonetheless, we remain convinced that the dialogue should continue and all technical cooperation should be able to be given in full respect for the rights of people, ensuring that the state can allow human rights to be promoted and implemented. To conclude, we call on the HRC to remain free of any politicization and remain a constructive, unpoliticized space, fundamentally protecting the Charter of the United Nations. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba.
Señor Vicepresidente.
Vice President, we reiterate our sincere condolences and solidarity to the government and the sister people in Venezuela as a result of the tragic impact of the recent earthquakes. Cuban health workers in Venezuela are entirely mobilized and are giving as I speak, medical support to the affected population. It's the responsibility of this Council to promote respectful dialogue and genuine cooperation with all states, in line with principles of impartiality, non-politicization, and non-interference. Cuba rejects any interference against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and against any other country. We reiterate our position of principle against punitive mechanisms without the consent of the concerned country. We call for the immediate cessation of UCMs imposed against the Venezuelan people, damaging their living conditions and violating their human rights. I conclude by calling on the Office of the High Commissioner to continue its exchange with the authorities in Venezuela on the basis of mutually agreed mechanisms guaranteeing respectful dialogue and constructive cooperation in full respect for the sovereignty of this country. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Greece aligns itself with the EU statement and thanks the High Commissioner for his report. We extend our solidarity to the people of Venezuela in the aftermath of the recent devastating earthquakes and express our sincere condolences to the families of those affected. Serious human rights concerns persist in Venezuela. Greece remains deeply concerned by the reports of repression against dissenting voices, restrictions on freedom of expression, association, and peaceful assembly, which undermine the possibility of free and effective participation of all political actors in public life. Significant challenges also remain with regard to arbitrary detention and accountability. Greece encourages the Venezuelan authorities to take further steps towards the release of all persons detained for political reasons, to prevent arbitrary detention practices and to ensure that reforms are implemented in a sustainable manner and in full compliance with international human rights law. Accountability remains an indispensable element of any credible transitional justice process. We take positive note of the release of a number of detainees, the issuance of visas to OHCHR staff, and the adoption of a general amnesty law. We note the urgency of taking further steps in this direction and express the hope that this may help restore public trust, advance national reconciliation, and pave the way towards a democratic future governed by the rule of law. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Thank you. We reaffirm our support to the Venezuelan people who are in our forts following Wednesday's devastating earthquakes and resulting casualties. Mr. Vice President, we thank the High Commissioner for its recent report and the continued engagement of his office in Venezuela. Some encouraging measures have been implemented, including the release of political detainees and the announcement of reforms. We also welcome recent dialogue between the Venezuelan authorities and representatives of the opposition, and encourage continued engagement to support progress towards a return to democratic norms. These developments represent a positive step and have the potential to improve the human rights situation on the ground. We hope that the coming months see continued progress on remaining challenges, including restrictions on civic space, arbitrary detention, and concerns around due process. In this context, we reiterate our call on the Venezuelan authorities to release those who remain arbitrarily detained, to continue to strengthen the rule of law, and to ensure an environment in which civil society, media, and political actors can operate freely and safely. We also underline the importance of constructive cooperation with the Office of the High Commissioner and other international mechanisms, including by facilitating their full access in support of accountability and sustainable reform. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Saudi Arabia.
تعرب بلادي عن خالص تعازيها ومواساتها لجمهور.
We would like to express our sincere condolences to Venezuela following the earthquakes which hit the coastal cities to the west of the capital Caracas, causing deaths and injury. We wish quick recovery to the injured, and we hope that those disappeared are found safe and sound. We stand in solidarity with Venezuela and with its people at this difficult time. It's essential to deal with human rights issues with objectivity, impartiality, and full respect for states' sovereignty, their independence, and their territorial integrity, as well as their particular national characteristics. It's equally important to ensure cooperation focused on Venezuela and the Office of the High Commissioner to ensure the rule of law is upheld and sustainable development continues. Supporting the national office in Venezuela is important in this context to ensure economic stability in order to allow the Venezuelan people to access their economic, social, and cultural rights, as well as to live in a safe and prosperous country. We urge Venezuela to continue its cooperation and dialogue with UN mechanisms according to principles of mutual respect and non-interference in the sovereign affairs of states. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sudan.
شكرا سيد نائب الرئيس.
Thank you very much, Vice President. We would like to extend our condolences to the Venezuelan people following the two earthquakes and thank the High Commissioner for his human rights report on the situation in Venezuela and indeed for the recommendations made therein. We greet progress made in human rights, in particular in economic, social and cultural rights, as well as civil and political rights. We also welcome the cooperation between Venezuela and the Office of the High Commissioner. We urge Venezuela to continue on this path, promoting women's rights, as well as the right to food, and to clearly define its priorities in the sphere of human rights. We also call on the High Commissioner to provide support to Venezuela according to its requests and requirements. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Dominican Republic.
Gracias, señor. Thank you, Vice President. We express our support to the Venezuelan people given the difficult situation the country is going through following the recent earthquake. The Dominican Republic has sent rescue teams, one of the first to reach the ground. Meanwhile, we note with concern the context in Venezuela, and we believe that recent events highlight the pertinence of maintaining changes in the field of human rights and the need to move towards a peaceful, sustainable solution of the situation. We welcome measures towards release of detainees and initiatives of national reconciliation. The Dominican Republic believes that lasting stability can only be achieved through a genuine process of national dialogue led by the Venezuelan people themselves and supported with the participation of the authorities, political actors, civil society, and various representative sectors. That dialogue should be aimed at strengthening democratic institutions, judicial independence, respect for fundamental freedoms, effective political participation, protection of civic space, and consolidation of rule of law. We urge the Venezuelan authorities to bolster their cooperation with OHCHR and the UN human rights mechanisms, promoting accountability and effective protection for all. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Indonesia.
Mr. Vice President, at the outset, Indonesia extends its deepest condolences to the people and government of Venezuela following the devastating earthquakes. Our solidarity is with the victims, their families, and all those engaged in rescue and relief efforts. Indonesia thanks the High Commissioner for his report. We reiterate our grave concern over any action involving the use or threat of force, which risks setting a dangerous precedent in international relations. We recall the High Commissioner's own assessment that force must not be used to pursue territorial claims or political demands. The sovereign equality of states, territorial integrity, and non-interference remain the foundation of the international order. Respect for international law and the principles of the UN Charter is non-negotiable. We echo the High Commissioner's call upon member states and the international community to review and lift sanctions that exacerbate the existing challenges and negatively affect the enjoyment of human rights. And we welcome the resumption of cooperation between Venezuela and OHCHR as a constructive path forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Turkey.
Mr. Vice President, we learned with deep sorrow the earthquakes that struck Venezuela. Our thoughts and prayers are with the friendly people of Venezuela and with those who have lost their loved ones. We stand ready to contribute to Venezuelan government's efforts. Turkey supports the cooperation between the UN and Venezuela. Our embassy in Caracas is in close cooperation with the representatives of the UN agencies, the national authorities, and civil society organizations. We hope that the OHCHR office will be fully functioning in Venezuela soon. Turkey reiterates that all political issues in Venezuela, including those in the field of human rights, can only be addressed through an encompassing dialogue and cooperation among the Venezuelans themselves. We welcome the amnesty law for democratic coexistence and the great national consultation for the reform of criminal justice. We hope that Venezuelans will continue to build consensus among themselves through dialogue, and all reforms will be effectively implemented, improving the political environment, strengthening the atmosphere of reconciliation. We welcome the easing of sanctions through a number of general licenses. We hope all sanctions will be lifted soon. Turkey will remain engaged with all relevant actors to help the Venezuelan people reach higher living standards and fully enjoy their human rights. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Peru.
Presidente.
Thank you, Vice President. Peru expresses its deepest condolences to Venezuelan people following the tragic loss of life and the many people wounded as a result of the earthquakes in the country. We state our solidarity in these difficult times. My country is grateful to the High Commissioner for presenting his report. We reiterate our concerns at the persisting human rights situation and the situation with fundamental freedoms in that country. We also welcome the return of the OHCHR team to the country and the first interactions held with the government. We trust that that presence will help bolster the institutional capacities and promote conditions enabling the Venezuelan population to fully exercise their human rights and fundamental freedoms. Peru takes note of the recent release of detainees and trusts that those measures will be part of a broader process aimed at guaranteeing fundamental rights in Venezuela. Nonetheless, we note with concern that there may still be Peruvian nationals detained. It's essential, therefore, to have updated information on their fate, their whereabouts, and health condition, and ensure full respect for their personal integrity, due process, and other fundamental rights. Finally, we reiterate our commitment to the restoration of democratic institutionality in Venezuela, respect for constitutional order, and the full relevance of human rights in Venezuela. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Egypt.
السيد نائب الرئيس بداية نتقدم
Thank you, Vice President. We extend our sympathies to the people and government of Venezuela following the two earthquakes there. We wish a swift recovery to all those wounded, and we've taken note of the OHCHR report on the human rights situation in Venezuela. We've noted the efforts made by the Venezuelan government to provide to citizens to ensure their fundamental rights and freedoms, and our position remains unchanged. We reject the creation of mechanisms in this council without the consent of countries concerned. We stress the importance of pursuing dialogue, constructive criticism, technical assistance, and capacity building with a view to promote human rights and ensure the country's cooperation with the Council in a climate of objectivity. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ethiopia.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. As the outset, Ethiopia expresses its condolences to the victims of the recent earthquake in Venezuela and extends its solidarity to the people and government of Venezuela at this difficult time. Ethiopia underscores that the promotion and protection of human rights are most effectively advanced through constructive engagement, genuine dialogue, technical cooperation, and capacity building undertaken in consultation with and with the consent of the concerned state. We take note of the efforts undertaken by Venezuela to strengthen engagement with international human rights mechanisms, promote national dialogue, and advance measures aimed at addressing human rights challenges. Thus, developments constitute important steps towards building trust, fostering an enabling environment for the enjoyment of human rights, and supporting sustainable progress. We encourage the continuation of such efforts and constructive cooperation with OHCHR. Ethiopia remains convinced that durable progress in the promotion and protection of human rights is best achieved through cooperation, mutual respect, and nationally owned process that reflect the priorities and aspirations of the people of Venezuela. In closing, Ethiopia reaffirms its support for approaches that promote human rights through constructive dialogue, technical cooperation, and respect for national ownership. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. This was the last speaker on the list. Excellencies, distinguished participants, this brings us to the end of our public meeting. We'll hold our next public meeting on Monday morning at 10 a.m. to continue the interactive dialogue on the High Commissioner's report on the situation of human rights in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Then to hold the enhanced interactive dialogue with the Independent Commission of Inquiry on the situation of human rights in North Kivu and South Kivu provinces of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, followed by the interactive dialogue with the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Burundi. We'll now take a short break before the closed meeting in relation to the complaint procedure of the Human Rights Council. The closed meeting will be held in person in the Assembly Hall. Only members of the Council participate in the meeting, and no webcast or recordings will be provided. I kindly ask all observers to leave the room. Thank you.
you.